So we're going to look at backgrounds and what you do with them because it can be really hard. So when you think of space, there's the space around the four corners of your edges. There's also the space moving back in your painting, the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. And we're going to talk about the background and how you fill that up. And I partially started thinking of this looking at your paintings from last week, and a lot of you had a solid object or a couple in the middle and nothing in the background, which is fine if that's intentional. I also started thinking of this. I saw this painting here at the Louvre this spring. I'd never seen it before. It's a Swiss painter. And I was really taken by how much of the foreground took and how the middle ground is just a sliver and then we have the background. And then I went back to his work when I was thinking about putting this together, and I realized he has a very singular way of filling his background. And I started thinking about all the different ways you can actually fill a background as like a cheat sheet. So he fills it very many marks. Even if, this is a solid mauve color or a solid green, it's made up of a lot of marks, maybe tons of leaves. He has this, almost impressionist application. That's a very interesting way because I recommend, like, if some of you want to have a solid color, maybe you want to, instead of having it just a solid color, maybe you consider making it solid with all of these individual marks. Another thing is to have a graphic solid background, like Amy Sherrill does. She says she does that to remove all markers of the time, and they make them timeless. You just notice the person, and it works better with the gray grisaille skin tone that she always paints. Barclay Hendricks did also a similar thing. He removed everything, made it graphic, and then played with the background and the colors of the clothing to make it very iconic. Also, there's people like DeCherco who treated the background as like part of the storytelling and a set design and stage. If you wanted to, you could have your object in the front and have this entire, he often used Greek mythology and, stories from Greek mythology happening in the far background. So there's the front ground, and then the middle ground might be the statue, and then the far background is like a ship sailing off. That's an interesting way to approach it. You could create an interior, so you could have your object in an interior like Telemadani does here. She often will do kind of like a little tiny bit of set design, almost like stage design also. Lois Dowd always does that. Her things are always happening in a scene with mirrors and like disappearing, views out the window. Cloud and skies. Frida Kahlo always had clouds. She was even, in all of her, it was part of her storytelling element. So thinking about what happens if I add a sky in the elements, what happens to my object then? Where does it place it, and what kind of story am I telling? Magritte also repeatedly used clouds. So if you think about it, is your background, are you doing enough storytelling in it? Are you, very consciously using that space? And some painters kind of almost collide their flatten it out so they're colliding. This is Nikki Malouf, and she often has the background seems to be coming into the foreground space in an interesting way. Whatever you choose, your job as a painter is to be completely conscious and completely decisive and intentional and strategic about what you're doing. So you can have a plain graphic background, that's great, but it has to be there for a reason. And if not, these are just options of other ways that you can consciously decide to bring those backgrounds to life in order to energize the object or the person or whatever you are trying to do. Often it's just a matter of adding a horizon line. Some of you had flat backgrounds, and I was looking at them this week thinking, well, even just a horizon line there would make it so much more interesting. You could add hints of a world beyond it, a hint of a horizon line. Even people like Forrest Best, who painted exclusively in these homemade language and symbols, they often put a horizon line in it to establish place. And it can kind of just help you energize the painting. Even a simple like this little gesture of a moon, a gesture of something. So tomorrow we are going to be looking at what you painted last week, and you can start a new one, that's fine, but I do want to start by looking at what you painted last week with fresh eyes and thinking, did I do enough in my background, and could I use one of these options? Even like you could paint just some cubist elements, some graphic, like some tilted planes that make you feel like there's some space there. I've always loved cubist backgrounds, and I'm thinking, why don't I use them more often? So yeah, that's super interesting. Also, like the idea of doing graphic shapes in your painting. This is an ancient Egyptian, like just honestly, just filling it with shapes or splitting your background in two, matching, just literally turning them into geometric shapes that refer to nothing. Or these very graphic shapes of two clouds and a sun. Telanan, she always broke up her background in an interesting graphic way. So some of you might want to look at your pieces and think, oh, if I did that, if I did a couple of stripes, it would really bring the center of my painting to life. Um, Also, this is a little easier to do in oil, but just creating this kind of blended, often it looks like on the canvas they're blending. Um, just creating this kind of, instead of a flat graphic, there's some life there and light there and actual oxygen um, in happening. You could also consider patterns, like Mary Faden, the British still life painter, always was, and obviously so was Matisse. It's tricky and hard, but it's very rewarding if you succeed in doing a background like that because it's so energized. So yeah, tomorrow we're gonna start by looking at the paintings from last week, or if you didn't do it last week, we'll start over and start a new one too. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye.